Good evening and welcome to NewsNight. This evening, we'll cover your need to know international news, like what country is finally joining the fight against climate change. We'll also have your national and local news, including your weekly Pittsburgh weather report. All this and more coming up on NewsNight. Saudi Arabia, the world's leading oil exporter, has announced their plan to reach carbon neutrality by 2060. The plan was announced by the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman at a conference in Riyadh. The country will start by reducing carbon emissions by 278 million tons a year and by planting 450 million trees. They plan to rehabilitate degraded lands and increase protected lands by 20%. He also plans to make Riyadh one of the world's most sustainable cities. This comes from pressure from environmentalists and the UN as to how the world's leading oil exporter will adapt to be environmentally friendly. Aramco, the world's biggest oil company, plans to do the same by 2050. The prince hopes this will influence other countries to do the same after research shows the devastating effects oil and carbon emissions have on the planet. Similarly, China also plans to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2060, after being the world's largest carbon emitter. Costa Rica, Denmark, and France are all three countries with the highest rate of sustainability through sustainable energy and removal of harmful carbon emitters. Environmental consciousness is becoming very important in today's society after much pressure from environmentalists, scientists, and activists. Many countries are likely to take after Saudi Arabia and reevaluate their carbon emissions. In the German town Lübeck, infrastructure workers stumbled across a peculiar artifact from the World War II era. The piece of history turned out to be a 79-year-old mummified cake. After being discovered in a cellar, the cake was sent to the city's restoration lab, where scientists collected samples to determine if it was a hazelnut and almond cake baked in 1942. In 1942, the town of Lübeck was bombed in an air raid during the midst of World War II. The building where the cake was found had collapsed into its cellar, and the heat from the flames caused the cake to carbonize into a charcoal version of itself. Somehow, the artifact stayed mostly intact for 79 years, with a still identifiable shape, sugar icing decorations, and wax paper wrapping. Archaeologists frequently find scorched remains of meals from long ago, but never usually as preserved as this. Archaeologists also found forks, spoons, knives, and vinyl records preserved in the same area. In national news, the search for unbiased jurors for the Ahmaud Arbery case has proven to be difficult for Glynn County, Georgia. Ahmaud Arbery was a 25-year-old black man who was out for a jog in Brunswick, Georgia, when he was attacked and killed by three men on February 23, 2020. The three men were Gregory McMichael, his son Travis McMichael, and William Bryan Jr., their neighbor. The three claimed they were performing a citizen's arrest on Arbery and then shot him in self-defense. They suspected Arbery of a burglary, and all three pled not guilty to all charges, which include malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, false imprisonment, and criminal attempt to commit a felony. The problem with finding jurors, however, is due to the preconceived notions most people have of the case. 60 of the hundreds of people summoned had already formed strong opinions about the case, or are turned away due to the social consequences of being a juror for the case. Another problem faced was the closeness the people in the area had. A large amount of the people summoned to the jury claimed to know Arbery or the McMichaels, since it is a smaller area. After 1 week of a search for jurors, 23 prospective jurors have been chosen and approved by both sides. There will be 12 jurors and 4 alternates for the case, to be narrowed down in the near future. Smaller businesses are finding issues with their supply. There are multiple cargo vessels are trying to correct the global supply chain issues. Nick Konopka has more information on this issue.
There are currently 62 cargo vessels waiting outside the ports of Long Beach and... God, what am I doing here? Los Angeles. As the ports work to overcome the recent disruptions to the global supply chain. These reports are from the entry point for 40% of all cargo entering the United States. That being said, the problems exist all throughout the supply chain, as more and more Americans are taking their time to return to work. Truck driving companies are understaffed, slowing down the transportation of goods across the country. The impacts of this clogged supply chain are already rearing its head to consumers who are facing empty shelves and steeper prices ahead of the holiday season. Many retailers are even telling shoppers to make their purchases now to ensure that they can get everything on their lists. Amazon, however, stated on Monday that they have made partnerships with freight carriers and expect their operations to run smoothly with little to no shortages. That being said, smaller businesses who do not have the resources of a company like Amazon are continuing to struggle with bare shelves. The Biden administration has implemented several plans to ease the supply congestion, including the authorization of 24/7 operations at the Port of Long Beach and Los Angeles, and the Department of Transportation is working to make it easier to get a commercial driver's license to quickly get drivers on the roads. Even with those remedies, some elements of this crisis are out of the national government's control. Come on! China, the source of many of these imports, has in place efficiency standards that limit the amount of electricity a factory can use. This means that some factories are having to halt operations as not to go over their power quotas. With all of these bottlenecks in the supply chain, forecasters are projecting that these issues may be with us for months, if not years to come.
Coming up after the break, we're going to have all your local Pittsburgh news. Find out what political figure is going to retire after nearly 3 decades in his position. Stay tuned. That was the funniest thing I've ever seen. That was Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, and welcome back to NewsNight. Most of the student body of the Pittsburgh Public School.
Some of the United States allies.
Thursday, the FBI was seen raiding.
Let's get started with today's forecast.
Today's high will only reach about 31 degrees.
It's looking a little cooler than we've seen in the past few weeks.
All this and more,
All this and more
All this and more coming up on NewsNight.
coming up on NewsNight.
coming up on NewsNight.
The Allegheny County Jail has been experiencing a high volume of prisoner deaths with surprisingly little information shared about them. Since October began, 4 men have died in the prison, 1 being from COVID. The other 3 causes of death were not released by the Allegheny County Medical Examiner's Office or the jail administration. Paul Allen, 55, Wickenley Harris, 48, and Justin Brady, 38, all passed of causes not yet released. This is troubling to officials, seeing as an investigation is launched after every prison death in order to find the cause of death. If needed, the jail will also do an internal review, all to find the cause of death and to search for any cause for concern. Members of the board believe this is a transparency issue on the fault of the prison. After the jail voted to put a mandatory de-escalation training for all correctional officers. The training will focus on mental health and verbal de-escalation rather than brute force. Even with these practices in place, and with no concrete evidence of neglect, there are still some groups that believe this is a problem caused by internal affairs. William Lucas, head of communications at the Abolitionist Law Center, claims, quote, "Our position is that these deaths that have taken place under Warden Harper and County Executive Rich Fitzgerald are not random or by coincidence," end quote. While there is no evidence of the claim, the Allegheny County Jail is investigating the problem. Residents of Pittsburgh have less than 1 month to participate in an upcoming art installation titled People We Love, created by Kit Monkman. The project is comprised of short videos showing participants gazing at photos of someone they love. To participate in the installation, You can sign up on its official website, www.peoplewelove.online, or send an email to Pittsburgh at peoplewelove.online. People We Love will be on display in downtown Pittsburgh beginning in spring 2022. A congressman that has been serving our local Pittsburgh area for nearly 3 decades is looking to retire. Nick Konopka has more on the story.
Hello again. Congressman Mike Doyle, who has served in the Pittsburgh area and Washington since 1995, recently announced that he will not run for re-election in 2022. Doyle, a liberal Democrat, voted against the Iraq War in 2002 and is a co-sponsor of the Medicare for All Act of 2021. In a speech made last week, Congressman Doyle emphasized the need to pass the torch to the next generation of legislators. Following this announcement, 2 members of the next generation has stepped up to the plate. So far, candidates Jerry Dickinson and Summer Lee have announced their campaign for PA's 18th district in Doyle's wake. Dickinson, in fact, has already been running for the seat after losing to Doyle in the 2020 Democratic primary. A law professor at Pitt, Jerry Dickinson, is running on a progressive platform in support of the Green New Deal, Medicare for All, and as well as increased federal spending on affordable and equitable housing in the area. Dickinson has already amassed over $300,000 in his campaign, outpacing Mike Doyle's numbers prior to his retirement announcement. Despite his fundraising head start, Dickinson will have to face off against State Rep Summer Lee of Braddock, who has raised over $100,000 in the first 24 hours of her campaign. Lee is a member of the Democratic Socialists of America, who has served in the PA State House since 2019. Lee, like Dickinson, supports the Green New Deal and Medicare for All. However, she strays from her opponent by supporting tuition-free public colleges and vocational schools. With these 2 progressive voices on the ballot, it is expected that more Democrats of all stripes will join the race for this most coveted seat come next May.
Sharpsburg police said that 2 men were in a canoe when it overturned on Wednesday, October 20th. This happened near the 62nd Street Bridge. 1 man was rescued and is doing okay. The other man, identified as 64-year-old Ralph Fuchs of Blawnox, unfortunately died due to not being able to swim, as well as the water being very cold. Etna Broad Fire Chief Greg Porter explained, "So somebody that falls into the water has a very short amount of time to be able to rescue themselves before the cold water is going to make them incapable of trying to do self-rescue." Porter also said that Fuchs wasn't wearing a life vest. The rescue and ultimately recovery mission lasted for over 4 hours when they finally recovered Fuchs' body on Wednesday evening. Officials said that what caused their canoe to capsize is unclear at the moment, and police are reviewing security camera footage as part of an ongoing investigation. Coming up after the break, we'll have your weekly Pittsburgh weather report. Find out when you'll need a coat or when to keep your umbrella handy. We'll be right back.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening, and welcome back to NewsNight. Most of the student body of the Pittsburgh Public School.
Some of the United States allies.
Thursday, the FBI was seen raiding.
Let's get started with today's forecast.
Today's high will only reach about 31 degrees.
It's looking a little cooler than we've seen in the past few weeks.
All this and more
All this and more
All this and more coming up on NewsNight.
coming up on NewsNight.
coming up on NewsNight.
Happy Halloween! The year's spookiest holiday is upon us. The week's been pretty chilly, but Claire Lindsay has what you can expect for this weekend and for the first week of November.
Thanks, Addie. Let's take a look at today first. Today's high is going to reach 58 degrees. There will be showers throughout the day with some light winds. At night, the temperatures are going to drop to a low of 51 degrees. The rain won't be letting up, though. The chance of rain throughout the night is 59% with considerable cloudiness. Make sure you're carrying your umbrella all day and staying dry. Now, let's take a look into this week's weather. This week, we're looking at high temperatures in the low to high 50s. The coldest day of the week is Wednesday with a high of 50 degrees and a low of 38. We'll be seeing rain all throughout the week, especially Sunday and Wednesday. Unfortunately, we won't be seeing much of the sun either. All week is looking to be partly cloudy, with Tuesday being the only day with a little sun. So get ready to bring out your winter jacket and a little extra layering under your costumes this weekend. That's all I have for your weather report. Back to you, Addie.
A nonprofit environmental group called the Ocean Cleanup is celebrating a major milestone in trying to rid the Pacific Ocean of its garbage patch. The nonprofit announced in a press release on October 20th that their technology made a major difference in collecting garbage from the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. In the initial test run, almost 20,000 pounds of plastic was removed by their collection fleet, System 02. This fleet, also nicknamed Jenny, collected a total of over 63,000 pounds, or over 28,000 kilograms, of plastic from the 9 test extractions that the organization ran. Boyan Slat, founder and CEO of the Ocean Cleanup, said in the press release that, quote, "While it's just the tip of the iceberg, these kilograms are the most important ones we will ever collect because they are proof that cleanup is possible. We still have a lot of things to iron out, but one thing we know now is that with a small fleet of these systems, we can clean this up," end quote. From the success of the Ocean Cleanup is now starting development of System 03, which is expected to be 3 times larger than System 02. That's all we have for you this week on NewsNight. I'm Addie Deal, and from everyone here at NewsNight, have a fun and safe weekend. Happy Halloween!